$116 a month to feed a family of 4. In 1970, that was the correct answer. The state of Louisiana printed it in a household budget, taught it to high school students, and a teenager could copy that figure onto a worksheet, hand it in, and get it marked right. Here is the same family, priced by the United States Department of Agriculture. By June of 1972, the Agriculture Department's low-cost food plan for a family of that size, 2 adults and 2 school-age children, cost $141.10 a month. Not a comfortable diet, the government's cheapest adequate one, so the answer was correct in the classroom and short by $25 a month in the kitchen. And that was before the worst of it. Nobody was taught the wrong thing here. Every number on that page came from a real federal standard, checked and published. What moved was the price underneath the paper, faster than a curriculum bulletin can be reprinted. The document is called the Consumer Education Curriculum Guide for Home Economics Teachers in Louisiana, Bulletin number 1171, prepared for the Louisiana State Department of Education, Division of Vocational Education, in 1970. In its appendix, there is a table headed Percent of Income Breakdown in the Budget for Family of 4. 2 columns. One for a household bringing home $400 a month after taxes. One for a household bringing home $600. And that table is the opposite of every ledger we have opened. A ledger is a record. Someone wrote down what they actually spent. This is a household budget written in advance by an institution and handed to a teenager as the correct answer. The institution was serious. Home economics was not a hobby subject. It was federal policy. The American Home Economics Association was organized at a convention in Washington, D.C. that ran from the 31st of December, 1908 into the first days of 1909, with Ellen Swallow Richards elected its first president. Richards was the first woman admitted to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and she taught sanitary chemistry there until her death in 1911. 8 years later, the Smith-Hughes Act was signed into law on the 23rd of February 1917, putting federal money into the salaries of teachers of trade, home economics, and industrial subjects. So when this subject taught a household budget, it was teaching an official one. Now the lines: food, 29%, housing, which the guide defines as mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and heating, 26%, household maintenance, 5%, household equipment, 4.5%, clothing and upkeep, 8%. That is $32 a month to clothe 4 people. Medical care, 6%. $24 a month for a family of 4, and there is no health insurance line anywhere on the page. Transportation and car, 9. Personal care, 2. Contributions and gifts, 2. Advancement, reading, and recreation, 3.5. Miscellaneous, 2.5%. And the last line on the page, savings and life insurance, 2.5%. On $400 a month, that is $10, $120 a year for savings and life insurance together. In the household, the state used as its teaching example. Look at the second column and something interesting happens. At $600 a month, food falls from 29% to 24%. Housing falls from 26% to 23%. And savings jumps from 2.5% to 11%. The guide is teaching a real and correct principle, the one economists call Engel's Law, published by Ernst Engel in 1857. As income rises, the share of it spent on food falls? What the page could not teach was the other direction. What happens to those percentages when the income holds still and the food does not? That is the whole of this story in one sentence. The worksheet taught shares of a pie. The economy was changing the size of the pie underneath them, and a share can look correct all the way down. Because here is what the food line did. The Agriculture Department repriced its family food plans every month, and printed them quarterly in a bulletin called Family Economics Review. Take one plan, one family definition, and hold both still, so we are comparing like with like. In September of 1972, the low-cost plan for that family came to $33.10 a week. The moderate-cost plan, $42.40. By January of 1974, 16 months later, the same low-cost plan for the same family cost $41.70 a week. The moderate plan, $53.20. That is a rise of 26% on the cheap plan and about the same on the moderate one in 16 months, with nothing about the plan changed, only the prices. The Bureau of Labor Statistics measured the same thing from the other end. Food at home, December to December 1973, up 22% in a single year. So, return to the worksheet. The taught food line was 29% of $400, $116 a month. By January of 1974, the government's own cheapest adequate food plan for a family of 4 had reached $180.80 a month, 45% of the income, on the food line alone, in a budget where the printed answer was 29. And the strangest part is what was happening inside those classrooms while the number fell apart. We will come back to that. There is no villain in this. Nobody lied to those students. The percentage was accurate when it was set, and it was still sitting in classroom cabinets 4 years later because curriculum bulletins are printed on a cycle measured in years, and prices are not. I think the percentage is what did the damage here, not the number beside it. A dollar figure goes stale where you can see it. A share of income never looks wrong. And notice what has to give. The worksheet has to total 100%. If food goes from 29 to 45, 16 percentage points have to come out of the other lines. There is no line called inflation to put them on, so they come out of clothing, out of recreation, out of medical care, and out of the smallest line on the page, which brings us to the savings line, and this is the part the page does quietly. $10 a month. That was the taught savings and life insurance line at $400 a month of take-home pay. It is the first line a household cuts because it is the only one that does not generate a phone call when you skip it. The grocer notices, the landlord notices, the savings passbook does not. And a household that did protect that $10, that put it away faithfully into an ordinary savings account, was earning a rate the law itself held down. Under the federal ceiling, known as Regulation Q, the most a savings and loan could pay on a passbook account was 5.25%, while consumer prices rose 12.3% across 1974. We have decoded that ceiling in full elsewhere on this channel. Here it is enough to say that the smallest line on the taught budget was also the one the decade punished hardest, whether the family kept it or not. Now, where did the state of Louisiana get its numbers? The same appendix answers that. Directly beneath the table, the guide tells teachers that the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates a couple without children needs 66% of the cost for a family of 4. A couple with 1 child, 87%, and a couple with 3 children, about 120%. That is the classroom worksheet pointing straight at a federal program. In the 1960s, the Bureau of Labor Statistics rebuilt a standard it had been publishing in some form since the 1940s into 3 costed levels: lower, intermediate, and higher. For a specific family, it defined in a footnote on every table: an employed husband, age 38, a wife not employed outside the home, an 8-year-old girl, and a 13-year-old boy. That was the household the United States government used to answer the question, how much does a family need? And it was the household standing behind the worksheet. Watch what happened to it. In the autumn of 1971, the intermediate budget for that urban family of 4 came to $10,971 a year. The lower budget, $7,214. The higher, $15,905. 3 years later, in the autumn of 1974, the intermediate budget, $14,333. The lower, $9,198. The higher, $20,777. The intermediate budget rose 30.5% in 3 years. Not because the family bought anything new. The list of things in that budget did not change. The price of the list did. Now the assumption most people carry about this subject and what the federal enrollment record actually shows. The assumption is that home economics quietly died in the 1970s. That Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 arrived. The classes were opened to both sexes, and the subject withered. The regulation is real. It was published on the 4th of June, 1975, took effect on the 21st of July that year, and it named home economics explicitly among the courses that could no longer be provided separately on the basis of sex. But the enrollment numbers go the other way. The National Institute of Education's study of vocational education, published in 1981, counted 3.7 million students in consumer and homemaking education in 1979, and in the National Center for Education Statistics series on vocational education, the share of American public high school graduates who completed at least one such course rose from 31.8% in 1969 to nearly 52% by the class years of 1979 to 1982. The sharpest change was among boys. In that same series, the share of male graduates completing at least one such course rose from 6.9% to nearly 35%. Read that twice. The class that everyone remembers as the girls' class, in the decade everyone remembers as the decade it died, was filling up with boys and reaching more American students than before. By that measure, the subject was at its high-water mark. What had changed was not the number of students. It was whether the paper in front of them still described the country outside. And you can watch the curriculum itself register the strain. A 1979 budgeting booklet produced for Florida students under a project sponsored by the United States Office of Elementary and Secondary Education works through the household of a family it calls the Greens on $970 a month, housing 25%, food 25%, transportation 12%, savings 3%. And then the booklet prints a second set of guidelines and asks the students to look hard at it. Food 26%, housing 30%, clothing 10%, transportation 7%, medical 8%, and the rest. Add that column, and it comes to 111%. The exercise is to find the error. But look at what the exercise has become by 1979. The skill being taught is no longer how to divide an income. It is how to recognize a plan that does not fit inside one. There is one more date, and it is the quiet one. The Bureau of Labor Statistics priced its urban family budget for the last time in the autumn of 1981 and published the final report in July of 1982. The intermediate budget by then stood at $25,407 against $10,971 10 years earlier. In that final report, the Bureau explained why it was stopping. Continuing the program would have required revised concepts, more current expenditure data, an extensive new price collection, and in its own words, funding was not available. The program was eliminated in compliance with an overall budget reduction, so the standard behind the worksheet was never corrected. It was discontinued. The country stopped publishing the number. That is where the mechanism sits today, and it is worth saying plainly as a fact about the record, rather than as advice. A budget built out of percentages will look correct no matter what the denominator does, which is why the page in that classroom never announced its own failure. And the federal standard that once answered the question of how much a family needs has not been published since July of 1982. The question did not get easier. The country simply stopped answering it in public. Think about what that leaves behind. A generation of Americans was taught, carefully and in good faith, exactly what a household was supposed to look like on paper. 29% for food, 26% for the house, 2.5% for savings and life insurance. They were taught by a federally funded subject, with a national statistical standard sitting behind every line. Within a few years, the food line alone had taken 45% of the taught income. The standard behind it had risen 30% in 3 years, and the office that published it had closed the file. The people who sat in those classrooms are in their 60s and 70s now, and when they say the budget they were taught stopped working, they are not being nostalgic. They are describing a documented event with a date on it and a printed page you can still read. It began with $116 a month, and the honest answer is that the number was right, and the world it described was already gone. If you kept a worksheet like that, or you taught from one, the comment section of this channel has become a genuine archive of these documents, and I read it. Next time we open the ledger, we will look at the side of it nobody teaches at all. What it cost a 1970s household to borrow